Hello everybody, here we are today talking about each remaining NHL playoff team and the last time they made it to the conference final. So before we get into that, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So just like we talked about yesterday with the second round coming to a close, I wanted to take a look at each of the remaining 8 teams, the last time they were able to move on to the third round of the playoffs, and then dive into how long it's been for them, whether or not they'd be happy. So we are kicking it off in alphabetical order with the Boston Bruins. So the Bruins ended up having 109 points on the season, and last ended up making the Eastern Conference Final back in 2019, where they would go on to lose to the St. Louis Blues in the Stanley Cup Final. Now, the good news for the team is they've been able to make the playoffs every year since then. The bad news is clearly there's been no major breakthrough as they get to the second round, and that is it at the moment. They've been able to get to the second round on multiple occasions, but if they are able to come back from a 3-1 series deficit against the Florida Panthers, then the question becomes whether or not this fan base is going to be happy with this. I think kind of middle ground, yes and no. Bruins fans, I think, have a certain expectation of what this team should be, especially over the past 15-ish years for this club, and I know a lot of people, including big hockey YouTubers, will say that the original 6 teams don't necessarily mean anything crazy special because, again, they aren't all the original teams that started the league. That is very true. However, a lot of these teams are over 100 years old or nearing 100 years old, and there is a certain specialness about being an original 6 member. Yes, again, it's not as significant as some people probably think when they learn about the league, but it means a lot, and the jersey means something more to these fans as there's so much history intertwined with these organizations. While I do think the expectations for Boston were lower this year, they were able to have a good season, so if they fail to make the Eastern Conference Final, probably still unhappy despite the fact that a lot of people may not have expected this at the start of the year. And as for the Carolina Hurricanes, they had another good season with 111 points on the year. They last made it to the Eastern Conference Final last year, so it's been kind of a norm for them. If they made it this time, it would be their third in the past 6 seasons, so 2 of the previous 5 they're able to make it to the final run before the Stanley Cup Final. But I gotta be honest, would this fan base be ultimately happy with making it to the Eastern Conference Final but not making it to the Stanley Cup Final? No, they would not be happy. It would be another feather in the cap, if you will. But for a team that's been able to go there twice and has been a really good team that has been younger, that has started to mature a little bit into what we're seeing today, they've won division titles, they've been able to have playoff success. This is all about winning a championship. Like we've said so many times before with the Hurricanes, they still have quite a bit of work to do against the New York Rangers starting tonight. If they win this game, that'll be a game 7. But if they are to get there again with Brendan Moore's core, they want to be able to win that first championship underneath him and see exactly how this plays out because he is still a coaching free agent, I believe. And then you have the Colorado Avalanche. The Avs ended up having a good regular season with 107 points, and the last time that they made the Western Conference Final was in 2022. I believe they ended up sweeping the Edmonton Oilers in that time. More notably, though, they ended up winning the Stanley Cup that season. The following season, so last year, they ended up getting knocked out in the first round, and I would say for this team, not making it to the Western Conference Final would be bad enough, but I think if they ended up going to the Western Conference Final and still lost, it doesn't really mean anything. I think for a fan base that has seen a lot of success in recent years, including a championship, getting to the brink of making it to a championship appearance doesn't really make them excited. They want to be able to see a team win its second championship and establish themselves, maybe not as a dynasty because winning another title in and of itself would be hard enough, but winning a second one would be, again, very, very difficult. So I think that regardless of how this all plays out, unless it ends with another championship, the fans are going to be frustrated, but I don't really know if that's going to happen. They are down 3-2 in the series against the Dallas Stars at the moment. Valeri Nichushkin ended up again being suspended, which we talked about that a little bit in yesterday's video. So do I expect them to go there? No. But do I think even if they get there and they don't move on, that the fans will be happy? Also no. And then you have the Dallas Stars. Now, Dallas had 113 points on the season and once again made the playoffs. They were last in the Western Conference Final just last year before they ended up getting knocked out against the eventual champions, the Vegas Golden Knights. They ended up getting revenge against them in the first round. And this would be the 3rd time in 5 seasons, should they make it to the Western Conference Final, that they've been able to get to that point. Of course, back in 2020, they ended up making it to the Stanley Cup Final and losing to the eventual champions, the Tampa Bay Lightning. They were pretty bruised. They were pretty battered. Tampa Bay is just a better roster at that point. But you're seeing the Stars now, a team that's been good to great in recent years. And the question then becomes, would a Western Conference final just be good enough to make the fans happy if they ended up losing? My answer to that is no. Dallas fans have seen a period for quite a while where they weren't making the playoffs, or if they were, they weren't really winning in the postseason. Whereas in recent years, they've been able to see a lot of postseason success, have seen some really good teams, and this team is not only been good, but it's got some up-and-coming players that are going to be playing a huge role, hopefully, for this team in the future of winning championships, and for Dallas being the top team in the Western Conference, one of the best teams in the entire NHL. It's really all about going on and winning that second championship in franchise history. Talked before about how it has been, quarter of a century now if they don't end up winning this, as they last won in '99. So it's kind of a big deal. This is a really good team, and they want to be able to get back there and then hoist Lord Stanley. And then you have the Edmonton Oilers, and Edmonton ended up having 104 points on the year, as yet again they made the playoffs. Didn't look like it was going to be perfect at the start of the year. Ended up firing Woodcroft and were one of the hotter sides in the league at points, and they were last in the Western Conference Final back in 2022. Like I mentioned, I do believe they ended up getting swept by the Avs. Put up a good fight, guys like McDavid did at least anyway, but they were just overmatched by a team that was really, really good. And the Avs ended up getting hurt by the salary cap that offseason and all those things. But they, of course, will be looking to make their second Western Conference Final appearance in 3 years. Last year, they ended up losing to the eventual champions in the second round, the Vegas Golden Knights. And just like Dallas, again, a very motivated team that saw a team knock them out, ended up winning the title. They want to go out there and win the title. I do think Edmonton's kind of in a weird spot where somewhat it would probably be a good thing that this team ended up making it to the Western Conference Final, but are the fans necessarily going to be happy? I'm going to say no for two reasons. One, Connor McDavid and some of the other names on this roster. McDavid is being considered as an all-time great already, is closing in on 1,000 career points. If he doesn't end up winning a championship for this team, I think unfortunately, like we've talked about in other videos, he's going to be viewed differently compared to some other all-time great players. So there's that. The second reason is this is a very passionate fan base in Edmonton, a Canadian market that has seen a lot of success in the 80s and the very, very early 90s. Of course, 1990. They've only went to one Stanley Cup final since 2006, or I should say since 1991, which was in 2006, where they lost to the Carolina Hurricanes. They want to be able to go back there and win another trophy, something they haven't been able to see in over 30 years at this point. So yeah, even making it to the Frozen Four, if you will, is not going to be good enough. And then you have the Florida Panthers. Florida ended up having 110 points on the season, and they were a team that last made the Eastern Conference Final last year, where they would go on to win it. It was just the second time they've had an Eastern Conference championship to their name. They would go on to lose to the Vegas Golden Knights in the Stanley Cup Final, a very heartbreaking final game of that series. But for this Florida team, they've been able to have a lot of success over the past 3 years, and some of that has translated into the postseason, as we can see. Do I think their fans would be happy with an Eastern Conference Final appearance? I'm going to say yes. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, this team for a very long time was not able to do a whole lot. And the second reason is they were able to back it up with good play. This isn't a team that's going to be real fluky. Yes, last year they dealt with a lot of injuries and had a little bit of a regression before they bounced back this year. They've been able to be one of the best teams in the league over the past 3 seasons when it comes to the regular season. When it comes to the playoffs, they are just not an easy out. And I'm not saying that they're a guarantee, as Boston did win Game 5. However, I do think they're probably going to go on to the Eastern Conference Final. Are they going to defend their crown and win their first championship? That kind of remains to be seen, but I do feel like an Eastern Conference Final appearance for the fan base would still be considered a very good year. And then you have the New York Rangers. They finished with 114 points on the season. Last made the Eastern Conference Final in 2022, where they lost to the eventual Eastern Conference champions, the Tampa Bay Lightning, who lost to the Colorado Avalanche in the Stanley Cup Final. For the Rangers, they again followed it up with a 2023 season that saw them knocked out in the first round. Kind of disappointing, but they were able to have a very good regular season this year with 55 wins. They finished again with President's Trophy, just a solid year where they are looking to win their first championship in like 30 years. Looking at this team, would I say they'd be happy with an Eastern Conference Final appearance only? Absolutely not. This is a fan base that is rabid, again, like the Bruins and other original 6 teams. When they're good, they expect to be really good, and they haven't had a ton of championship success in their history. Again, they are nearing 100 years old. I think they started in 26 or 27, and they only have 4 championships to their name. A really good year for this team. Of course, it would be nice to see them get there to the Final Four, if you will, but anything less than a title is not going to cut it for this team. And of course, the fan base would show their displeasure. And then finally, you have the Vancouver Canucks, and they had 109 points on the season. This was a good breakout year for them, and they are looking to make it to the Western Conference Final for the first time since 2011. This team has not been really able to do a whole lot in the past decade. They've not been a regular playoff team, but at points with this era that we're seeing with some of these players like Hughes, Pedersen, Besser, etc., they've been able to have a little bit of postseason success. Of course, they made it to the second round back in 2020, and then, of course, now they're in the second round yet again. They won the qualifying series, or the qualifying run against Minnesota back in 2020, so they've been able to have a little bit of moments here or there. They're still not a true championship contender, but I gotta be honest, I do think that with how good of a year this has been for the team, and with how rough things have been over the past decade in terms of playoff success or no playoff appearances at all, making it to the Western Conference Final in and of itself would be a very big deal. And I'd have to imagine for this team, it's going to be a tough battle against the Oilers, but if they make it there, at the very least, whether they play Dallas or Colorado, they can hold their heads up and know they put up a good fight. So yeah, just looking back at all the teams and the last time they made it to the conference finals, a lot of these teams are very, very recent, which is interesting. Looking at Boston and Vancouver, I believe they have the oldest streaks, if you will, of not making it to the conference finals. Boston's isn't even that old. Vancouver's kind of is. Again, it's over a decade. I guess it is approaching 15 years if they don't make it. But I guess if you look at it from that perspective, Vancouver is the team to kind of root for. Again, I'm not saying necessarily, but they aren't a team that's been able to have a lot of postseason success compared to some of these other teams in recent years. You know, your Colorados, your New Yorks, your Dallas especially. I am just going to say that this is going to be fun to see who makes it to the Final Four, and hoping the teams that are able to prove themselves and show that they are worthy of going to the Stanley Cup Final are able to do that. But anyway, what are your thoughts on these teams and their droughts and whether or not they'd be happy as a fan base? If you're a fan of one of these teams, let me know if you would be happy or not if they made it to the Western Conference Final or the Eastern Conference Final, all that stuff down below. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe, have a great night, and you go off hockey, alright? Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.